Let's talk about this differential we have on the Red Sport and, well, all the Q50s and Q60s. Why didn't Infiniti give us a mechanical limited slip differential, especially us Red Sport guys? We especially deserve a limited slip differential. Why? I guess I can think of a couple of reasons. First reason is, personally, I don't think the Q50, Q60 is like, super, completely in the sports car category. I say it kind of puts one foot in the GT car category and then maybe a bigger foot in the sports car category. So you got that working against getting a mechanical limited slip. Then I don't think Infiniti really wanted to compete with like a true AMG, like a C63 or M3, M4 or RS3, RS5. I don't think Infiniti really wanted to compete with them, even though they gave us the horsepower on the Red Sport, but that would have put the Q50 and Q60 more in that conversation, and I think they wanted to avoid that. But the main reason that I can think of that you would give us this type of differential is for control. So let's back up. So let's look at the two extremes of a differential. You got an open differential, and then you got your welded or your fixed or whatever other word you want to use for the wheel spinning at the same time. So when you have an open differential, it allows you great turning ability, but open differential is not good for accelerating in a straight line. As soon as one wheel loses traction, it's over. It only can transmit 50% of the torque to each wheels, and the wheel that's got free, it's the one that's going to get all the torque. Then if you have a fixed or welded differential, it's good for going in a straight line, but it's going to understeer when you turn. So a mechanical limited slip is actually a compromise between the two. So it's, the keyword limited allows you some slip so that you are able to make the turn, and then as soon as you get on the gas, it's going to lock up and let you be able to accelerate out of the turn. But it's fixed, meaning that its functionality is fixed. It is only whatever gear set you have in there, whatever clutches you have in there. If it's one way, one and a half way, two way, it's set. And that's what you have to deal with unless you're going to open up that pumpkin and change the gear set or change out those clutches. But when you go to what Infiniti has here, now you're able to go between a fully open diff to as locked as much as the brakes can handle and everything in between. You get full control over, well, almost full control up until what the brakes can handle. Control over the rear over the rear axle and each individual wheel. So that's why you would go to a Brake LSD or active Brake LSD, depending on who you hear it from. This is actually common in off-road world to have a active Brake LSD. So it's not like, something that they just drew out of their hat. But this is the main reason why it's to having that complete control. So let's talk about this control that Infiniti gains from not having a fixed mechanical limited slip differential. There are some very fancy stuff they can do, especially since invention of ABS and then all the stuff that kind of spawned from ABS. And I'm sure a chart here. So if we starting with ABS, and you know, everybody knows what ABS is. It keeps the wheels from locking up when you slam on the brakes. But spawning off of that, you have brake force distribution, which for Infiniti, all it does is controlling brake bias front to rear. So it's kind of like your first 2-channel systems that when ABS first came out, it was 2 channels. It was just front to rear. Then we have electronic brake force distribution, which is controlling the brake force mainly when you're turning. So when you're turning and you pressing the brakes, it will brake in a manner to help you turn. Then, you know, we started getting all these new safety systems now. So you have the emergency brake assist that they used. So when they put like an accelerometer on your brake pedal, and when you panic stop, the ABS is going to basically give you maximum power before, you know, without even needing your leg to, you know, push the dang brake pedal through the floor. The ABS system going to do it for you. And I can tell you that saved me a couple of times with somebody cutting me off or something like that, and I have to press the brake quick, and before I can even get full pressure on the brake, the car already stopped. So I love that. Then another thing kind of coincides with, you know, your transmission and your yaw sensor together, but using the ABS system, if you're sitting on a hill, and usually, especially guys who drive in clutch cars, or, you know, with a manual, you know, sitting on a hill can be a challenge. But you got hill start assist. Well, it will just hold the brakes for you. And on Infiniti, it holds it for 2 seconds, and then it gradually lets the pressure off. So it turns into like a 3-second or so brake hold, depending on how steep the hill is. All right, now we start getting into, you know, the nannies. You got traction control, and then for Infiniti calls their stability program VDC, or vehicle dynamics control. So a lot of people will get it confused, and they say turn off traction control or turn off VDC, and not realizing that it's actually 2 different things. So traction control, all it cares about is wheel speed. Wheel speeds needs to be consistent with each other based on what you're trying to do. So if you're turning, it knows the outside wheels are going to spin a little bit faster, and so it allows that. But if you're going in a straight line and one wheel decides to spin a little bit faster, then it's going to start trying to brake that wheel to get everything back under control, which is kind of like a pseudo limited slip, but is way more aggressive, and you'll see what I mean when I go a little further. Then you got VDC, which is what everybody sees on the car. They see turn off VDC, or VDC off button. VDC only cares about understeer and oversteer, and it's looking at your yaw and your yaw/slip sensor to see that, well, and your steering angle sensor, like, okay, he turned the car this way and the car should track this way, and is it doing that? And if it's not, then it's gonna use the ABS system again to brake, you know, a outside tire to slow your rotation down, or brake a inside tire to make sure that the car doesn't understeer. So but these systems, I put them in blue on purpose because majority of the systems in the blue section are all reactive systems. They're just reacting to what you do, and they're trying to correct it after the fact. Now you get to this ones that I put in the green. These starting to be where everything is just based off the ABS, and they keep, you know, making it a little bit better. And these green systems on the car are actually more proactive. And one of those is the Brake Limited Slip Differential. And then I kind of threw in the Tesla ETS, the all-wheel drive system, where it's it's using traction control, but it's a little more reactive, but it's also predicting too. So I kind of put that in the green. But this is not a video about the all-wheel drive system, so I'm gonna leave that alone. But then you also got, now the next one you have is active trace control, and this is another proactive system. So let me go through active trace control first. So remember, VDC is reacting. So you coming off your line, off the intended line, and you start understeering or oversteer, VDC is going to kick in and correct. So these engineers, and software engineers decided, hey, we can, instead of letting you go off your line, how about we help you stay on the line in the first place before we have to drop down and actually activate VDC. So we get like a tiered system here. So active trace control is going to say, oh, he's trying to turn right at so many degrees and the car should track this way, and we're going to help him or her keep that trajectory. And this is before, so that you don't go off the line in the first place. But it's subtle. So it only helps, it does, like I said, it's a tiered system. So it gives you subtle help by, once again, using the brakes. And you know, if it wants you to turn a little bit more, it's going to brake the inside tire. If it needs you to, if it senses that it might potentially understeer here a little bit, then it's going to brake an outside tire, and I mean oversteer, and it's going to brake an outside tire a little bit to make sure you stay on the line. This is all predictive. But then, if you finally exceed whatever limits that are in active trace control, then you're going to drop down to VDC, and VDC is going to aggressively correct. And everybody knows what I'm talking about, you know, VDC with the party pooping. All right, now let's get to the actual brake limited slip differential using ABS once again. So it's going to function exactly the way your mechanical limited slip differential functions, and you know, but with the complete range between open and full lock, you know, lock up into your brakes. But once again, this is a proactive system. So it's gonna at first try to calm, you know, one of the drive wheels. So if you got all-wheel drive, it's doing this on all four tires. If you got rear-wheel drive, it's just doing it on the rear. So when one of the wheels starts to spin a little bit, it's gonna brake it to get it back in control. But if for some reason it can't get it back in control, then traction control is actually going to kick in, and traction control has the ability to actually pull torque from the engine. So traction control is more aggressive. It's going to pull torque from the engine, and it's going to try to brake the wheel, where brake limited slip is only using the brakes to try to get the wheels under control. So if you can't get the wheel under control with brake limited slip, aggressive traction control kicks in. And also, brake limited slip is mostly in effect from a standing start. That's when it mostly is in effect. You know, after that, you got active trace control really kicking in more than, you know, than the brake limited slip would. Which is kind of, you know, exactly what a limited slip would do. I mean, it really is getting out of the turn is what you care about with a limited slip. And then after that, it's kind of, you don't really feel it no more, because it did its job. And it's similar with the brake limited slip. But like I said, like I keep repeating, it has its drawbacks of doing the brake limited slip is it's the brake pads in the rear. So you're going to get premature wear in your brake pads in the rear, and in the front if you got an all-wheel drive car. You know, you're going to get all four brakes getting a little bit more wear than usual. And then if you add in active trace control, you know, tapping the brakes a little bit, you know, the brakes are going to wear a little bit more doing this. But brake pads is a consumable, you know. It's easier to change some brake pads than it is to switch out or worn out differential, especially if Infiniti, you know, gave us a VLSD like they had on a G37, which eventually wear out and they turn into open diffs anyway. Whereas in this case, the advantage is you want everything to come back. Well, change the brake pads and everything's back working fine, instead of having to, change out everything in that pumpkin and refresh it. Or you are fluid limited instead of friction material limited. So the vicious LSD, if I said the vicious right, I think I did. LSD was very fluid limited. So once you exceeded whatever the heat capacity of that fluid and it started boiling, you pretty much had an open diff anyway. Where here on the brake limited slip, you're more pad limited. So you could do something like put a more aggressive biting pad in the rear, and that brake limited slip would be way more effective, and then you let brake force distribution and do the work of compensating for the the back pads being a little more aggressive than the front pads, using all these electronics in your favor. That's the one way you can kind of take a little bit more advantage of this system. But the point is, you get to use stuff, you get to be proactive with having brake limited slip instead of a mechanical. You can use software and make the car way more drivable or nimble than what a mechanical limit slip would be able to do, because mechanical limit slip is only reacting to usually one input. It's how much torque you're putting on the diff, and then it's going to try to distribute that. That's it. But an active brake or brake limited slip gets to see everything. It gets to see all the wheel speeds, gets to see your yaw sensor and slide sensor. It gets to see your steering angle sensor. It gets to see if you're on the brakes or off the brakes. It gets to see everything before it decides how much it's going to lock up or unlock a particular wheel. So you get this big advantage with the brake limited slip. Now, I think I have a video of this. Like I said, since it's kind of brake pad limited, and usually your engine can exceed the brake pads, and you've seen all these burnout videos. That's what's happening. You holding the front brakes and your engine is exceeding your rear brakes. So with the amount of torque and how quick the torque comes on this car, when you get into something like an autocross or on track and you really gunning it out of a turn, you're gonna exceed the braking capacity of the friction material, the pads, unless you put some crazy, good pad on there that can hold the wheel. But really, most pads ain't gonna be able to hold the wheel. And so when you think it's gonna lock, it's not. Or at least not a complete lock, because your torque of the engine exceeds the torque of the brake pad. So that's where it kind of falls apart. Now, for street use and for a vast majority of people, the brake limited slip differential is more than adequate for them. I mean, I don't know how they could even complain, because they won't be doing nothing to really exceed their brake material, the friction of the brake pad, and getting one wheel pills. Like, you can even find videos of people doing showing both wheels spinning and doing a burnout with a Q50 or a Q60, because in general it does its job very, very well until you start getting into more of the motorsport region, and that's where you would go back to a mechanical limit slip. So that's kind of the advantages and disadvantages of having a brake limited slip. Like I said, for the vast majority of people, this is more than adequate. But for people who want to do some motorsports, autocross, track days, yeah, I feel you. It's time, we got to put a mechanical one back there. But daily driving, back canyons, back roads, mountain roads, brake limited slip, more than adequate. Let me give you one more interesting little nugget. when you press the VDC off button, the brake limited slip is still enabled. So, but you lose traction control. So it will still try to function like a LSD even when VDC off, when you press the VDC off button. So, but yeah, I hope that y'all, learned something from this again. That's my intention. And if you haven't already, and I haven't said this before, hit the subscribe button. Thanks. I'm out.